Lakers have not missed a shot in 8 minutes. Walker, good look.
When you make a definitive statement as a sports commentator, there's always a chance that your words are going to blow up right in your face and potentially immediately afterwards. Which is why so many of these cowards choose to speak in vagaries. But not the men on this list today, oh no. They took their stances, made their bold proclamations, and had what they said proven wrong in spectacular fashion, and so we're going to make fun of them now for their brave but hilarious failures. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point. A massive thank you to our channel Hall of Famers for their continued support, and these are 10 times commentators ate their words. Number 10, Rogan hilariously gets everything wrong. Joe Rogan is one of my favorite fighters ever. Always been a massive fan going back to Tough, but of course he debuted in the UFC prior to going on the show when he took on Jens Pulver in Lil Evil's return to the promotion after 4 years away. Given that this was Joe's first UFC fight and Jens was a former champion, Pulver was a massive favorite. What I love about this entry is how pinpoint wrong Joe Rogan is in what he says prior to the fight. As Lozon is walking out, Rogan has this to say about the striking matchup.
Joe has a good stand-up game, but it's not at the level of Jens Pulver's.
He would further go on to say that Lozon should try to get Pulver to the ground, but unfortunately, Jens has great takedown defense, so this is going to be a very hard fight for Joe. Seconds into the bout, Lozon scores a takedown, something that obviously takes Joe and Goldie by surprise.
He might have just caught him slipping there.
Then they hilariously state that it's a good thing that Lozon was able to secure that takedown because he does not want to stand with Pulver. Before the fight gets back to the feet, and Joe almost immediately KOs Jens with a left hook.
Down goes Jens is out! And he's out!
It was like everything Joe and Goldie were saying instantly went the exact opposite way. Even their assessment of what finished the fight was wrong, as they initially thought it was a knee. So much funny packed into 48 seconds. Number 9, Conor gassing Khabib. Dominic Cruz is one of the greatest fighters and minds that this sport has ever seen, but that doesn't always translate to his commentary. And to be fair to the guy, I don't know how any of them make assessments during a live fight that sound any kind of coherent, especially big fights where the crowd is losing their minds. Like Conor versus Khabib. In the first round, as Nurmagomedov had McGregor on the ground and was working for better position, Cruz made note that Conor could be worn out by the grappling and that Khabib would eventually take advantage of that by landing shots. But then in the second round, which was infinitely worse, Dom had a baffling take that was the exact opposite and got checked in real time by Joe Rogan.
He's trying to win. He's trying to gas Khabib out because he's taking shots.
I don't think he's trying to gas Khabib out. I think he's getting smashed.
This confusing reversal of the stance he took in the first round was followed by Cruz wondering aloud why Conor wasn't trying to get up, almost implying that his theory about gassing Khabib was valid. After McGregor rallied in the third, at the start of the fourth, Joe Rogan made note that Conor looked good, prompting Dom to yet again posit that his theory was correct, only to question his own logic in the same stream of words.
I swear I think this is when he was looking to try to get him, wait for Khabib to get a little tired on the takedowns and look to knock him out later. You would think it'd be the other way around though.
Yes, you would think it would be the other way around, Dominic, because it was the other way around. Khabib would submit an exhausted McGregor a few minutes later. Number 8, eye candy only. So on MMA Uncensored, an MMA discussion show on Spike TV, host Craig Carton shared a sentiment that was probably fairly popular among fans at the time when discussing the upcoming Strikeforce bantamweight title fight between Miesha Tate and Ronda Rousey.
Mike, it's a great piece and it brings to mind what I've always felt about women in MMA, and that is sex appeal sells, and if these women were not thought of as attractive, no one cares about this fight.
Oh my God.
But co-hosts Nate Corey and Mike Straka pushed back at Carton's sentiments, trying to convey the level of athlete that both fighters were, and how it was unfair to say that their attractiveness was the key factor in interest in the fight. Of course, Ronda Rousey would in very short time become one of the biggest athletes in the entire world and usher women's MMA into the UFC, where many stars would emerge that fans genuinely wanted to watch fight. Two women just co-headlined one of the biggest cards in history in a giant bubble TV. Obviously, the interest in women's MMA has gone far beyond the novelty of pretty lady throw punches, and while there were probably plenty of guys watching Uncensored that night that were like, hell yeah! Unfortunately for Craig, Rousey's star would start changing the landscape of the sport about 10 seconds after this episode aired. His closing statement on the matter wouldn't do him any favors either.
You know what, I'm not going to make a pick in this fight. What I'm going to do instead, I'm going to go home, I'm going to get out my old DVD of Wild Things, I'm going to watch Nev Campbell fight Denise Richards, because that's the kind of chick fight I like.
Oh, God, don't be such a wanker.
More than anything, it does show where some people were in the community at the time, and it's pretty amazing to see just how much the sport has changed in the last 12 years. Number 7, Rousey's perfect striking. Fight predictions are incredibly hard. I just did a video the other day about that, in fact. Even the greatest minds in the sport can get a fight completely wrong or assess a fighter in a way that turns out to be entirely off. Legendary fighter, commentator, bouncer Bas Rutten posted a little prediction video on Fight Week for Ronda Rousey versus Amanda Nunes. Given the high-profile nature of Rousey's loss to Holly Holm and the year off since, many fans had come to the conclusion that Ronda's striking and her confidence in it was her biggest detriment and a huge part of her failure against Holm. Bas had a different take though.
Everybody says, oh, her striking is this and her striking is bad. It's not. When she did the Brazilian Open workout, and I talked a few times about this, her striking looked phenomenal. She looked to me near perfect.
Near perfect is a strong phrase, implying, well, near perfection. Something I don't think I've ever heard anybody else categorize Ronda's striking as. El Guapo would go on to say that Rousey was stunned by a big shot early against Holm, and that was why she fought the way she did. While he thought if Nunes was to win, it would be via knockout, hey, he was right. He predicted that Rousey would get the victory because Amanda would be overly aggressive and get tossed and subbed. Oh no, he was wrong there. Nunes would very aggressively beat the shit out of Rousey for the entire 48-second fight, as Ronda tried to strike perfectly until the point that she was half-conscious, reaching for a clinch before Herb Dean stepped in. Number 6, Sylvia over Fedor. This might be a hot take, but Joe Rogan is a bit of a contrarian. Not purposefully, he's not going out of his way to say the opposite of others because it's the opposite, but it does seem like on many topics, if almost everyone is in agreement, Joe convinces himself to go the other way.
And if you believe in NASA, bro, there's some videos of guys jumping around on the moon.
Case in point, when Tim Sylvia beat Gan McGee, his first heavyweight title defense in the UFC. Not a single soul saw that victory and said, I think the Maniac would beat prime 2003 Pride heavyweight champion Fedor Emelianenko. Take it away, Joe.
Yeah, bring on Fedor now. I gotta think right now, Tim Sylvia would have an advantage over him.
Sylvia himself would take his time on the microphone after the big win to call out Fedor as well. Unfortunately for Joe and Tim, Frank Mir would break Sylvia's arm in his next title defense, which put a quick damper on the Fedor talk. But lucky for our list, Rogan was given the opportunity to eat his words more definitively, albeit 5 years later, when Tim did in fact fight Fedor in Affliction and got beat in 36 seconds. Number 5, Miguel Torres, pound for pound number 1. If Dana White could build a time machine and go back and do one thing, he'd travel to WEC 37, and when Frank Mir called Miguel Torres the pound for pound best fighter in the world, he'd punch him right in the face because that's John Jones and nobody else. If you locked Miguel Torres in a room with John Jones, who's getting out, Frank Mir? Who? Anyway, this was a thing that Frank said while on commentary that night before Torres' bout with Manny Tapia.
Miguel Torres, what can I say? I feel that he is the best fighter in the world, pound for pound.
So here's the thing. Torres was ranked in the top 5 by most outlets at the time, pound for pound. I mean, the guy was 35-1 and was in his second WEC defense, which means you could make an argument that he was the best, right? The problem is that he had Anderson Silva, GSP, and Fedor ahead of him during their epic prime career runs. And given the level of competition at bantamweight at the time compared to those three, that's a really hard sell. Best 135er in the world, nobody is gonna bat an eye, but you took it too far, Frank. While Mir would not eat his words on that night, even though his words were absurd ones, 9 months later, Brian Bowles would knock Torres out and knock him out of the pound for pound discussion as well. Number 4, Goldie's wrong cloth call. We all remember the iconic call from Jon Anik about the cloth from which Leon Edwards was cut before his incredible knockout kick against Kamaru Usman. It's one of the greatest calls in the history of the sport because of the timing of it. Well, poor Mike Goldberg, he did the exact opposite, possibly the worst timed call ever, and honestly, watching it back, it deserves to be just as iconic. It is the massive 205 card. Conor McGregor's gone full Ultra Instinct against Eddie Alvarez, he's got his arms behind his back, he's looking near perfect. But for about a minute in that second round, Eddie is getting in some clinch work against the cage. When they break, Mike decides that it's the perfect time to talk about Eddie starting to see success, and he does it during one of the most famous knockout sequences in MMA history.
Alvarez getting loose, getting better here in this round, though.
Oh, man.
Until that.
Oh, he's done.
Hey, at least he realized it and said until that. Man, there was no way to know that moment was going to be the end of the fight, but it truly is amazing that those are the words that he was saying as Conor is just unloading an ungodly combo into Eddie's face. Bonus Goldie moment, thinking Evan Dunham versus Sean Shirk is over, and saying his iconic catchphrase.
It is all over. No, sorry. Looked like Shirk could tap there, John.
Oh man, that's good shit right there. Number 3, 209 tattoo. In the lead up to the very short notice fight between Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor at UFC 196, there weren't a ton out there that thought Nate Diaz could win, and the betting line reflected that, with Conor coming in a minus 450 favorite. Nate wasn't in training at the time either, having just returned from a vacation, so you could absolutely forgive any voice in the community for thinking Stockton's second son didn't have much of a chance. But Jon Anik went a whole lot further into shoe and mouth territory when he declared on the Anik and Florian podcast days before the event,
I will get the area code 209 tattooed on the inside of my forearm if Nate Diaz comes off vacation and beats Conor McGregor. I might even get it anyway, just as a tribute to the Diaz brothers.
The wager went viral on Fight Week, and almost immediately after Diaz finished McGregor, fans started calling on Anik to pay his tattoo debt. Even Nate himself chimed in the post-fight presser.
Jon Anik better get a motherfucking 209 tattoo. I'm gonna whoop his little ass.
Shortly after the event, Jon tweeted asking for tattoo artists in South Florida with praise for Nate's performance. And like the boss he is, Anik made good on his promise. As he's told the story since, the tattoo idea was something he thought would play well on the podcast and was a huge Diaz brothers fan, so if his prediction was wrong, it would be a win-win, and he was right, as it tied Anik, who wasn't yet lead commentator, into one of the biggest events in UFC history. Number 2, Rocky's obituary. In case you forgot how Rocky vs. Kamaru 2 played out, Usman was bullying Son all over the damn cage for the better part of 5 rounds. It was one of those fights that, as it went on, your eyes were more focused on social media than the obvious outcome, especially as the clock dwindled down in the 5th, and it looked very much like the champ was going to easily retain, as Edwards had not put forth any real offense the entire night. The commentary team could also see the writing on the wall as the final minute approached.
He may have resigned himself to losing a decision.
Well, that's what Dean Thomas said.
Yeah.
Dean feels like that would be a moral victory for Leon Edwards.
A moral victory in finishing, resigning to losing. In no uncertain terms, Joe and DC were telling us they thought that Edwards was going to coast to the finish and accept his loss. But as we discussed in the Goldie entry, Jon Anik knew better.
But that is not the cloth from which he is cut. I mean, that is a dejected...
My favorite part of this entire moment is absolutely the most fitting thing to discuss for this particular list, which was DC in his reaction post-KO, saying to Joe that they were writing Leon's obituary before that kick. It's perfect, and also shows that maybe commentators eating their words can add to a moment. Number 1, the Machida era. An era as defined by Oxford Languages is as such, a long and distinct period of history with a particular feature or characteristic. The first word there that is not an article is long, and that is because it's perhaps the most important feature of an era. The undefeated Lyoto Machida knocking out the undefeated Rashad Evans to take the light heavyweight championship after a run of 6 victories in the UFC did in fact leave a strong impression with everyone who saw it, no more so than Joe Rogan, who made a declaration that would go on to be mocked for the next 15 years and counting.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Machida era.
But of course, Joe's proclamation would be perhaps the greatest reminder that in mixed martial arts, nothing is certain and nothing lasts. As in his very next fight, Machida would get beat down by Shogun Rua for 5 rounds, only retaining because the judges absolutely lost their minds. In the immediate rematch, the Dragon was knocked out in the first 4 minutes, and the Machida era had sadly come to an abrupt end.
That was like my worst prediction of all time. Welcome to the Machida era. Like, he lost right away.
You know whose era has just begun though? The editor of this video, Max Randall. Please follow this man on all his socials and go check out his kick-ass YouTube channel. Another huge thank you to our channel Hall of Fame members. Not only do you help keep the lights on, but your suggestions are fantastic. Fight fans, hit the join button, become a member too, get exclusive content. It is that simple. Like and subscribe or I'll get a 209 tattoo as well. Comment down below what you think Dominic Cruz was trying to say in that commentary on the Conor fight. And thank you so much for watching, you guys. I love you. We'll talk again soon.